can't turn the tide. Let the water go where it wants.
Hello everybody, it's Pete here from See Your Toes Again. This is my third podcast, and today we're going to be talking about understanding the macros, and by that I mean the macronutrients, the carbohydrates, proteins and fats, so your three macronutrients, understanding what each one means as far as being ketogenic in your new diet. This is assuming you don't already know all of this stuff, of course. And then we will discuss what quite a few people have go wrong, because you'll find in a few weeks, then of course you'll start to get a little bit more complacent perhaps, and then that's when people start making wrong decisions, and eventually from those wrong decisions they end up saying, oh, this keto diet isn't working for me, and then they give up. So we can avoid that. So that's what we want to talk about today. Right, so understanding the macros, the macronutrients, there are, like I said before, there are three main macronutrients. There is the proteins, the carbohydrates, and the fats. Now, each one of those is kind of completely different from each other. The proteins are going to be important regardless of what diet you're on, even whatever you're on at the moment. If you haven't switched over to my suggestion for ketogenic diet, a lot of people tell you day to day not to eat protein. That's like you're eating too much protein, it's bad for you, it's going to give you kidney problems, it's going to do this and that, the next thing. It's important for you to understand that every bit of your body is constructed from protein, from the skin, from your tongue, from your eyes, your blood, all of your internal organs, your bones, your fingernails, your hair, all of your hormones like testosterone and estrogen and all of these other hormones, all of them are made from protein. And if you go and limit your protein intake, then you're limiting your ability for your body to keep up with not only building new muscle tissue and growing, but also just maintaining. And, a lot of people just aren't eating enough protein, and then they wonder why they're getting sick all the time. So we'll talk about that in more detail shortly, but protein, regardless of what diet you're on, is really important. Protein comes from meat and fish and cheese and nuts. There's a lot of protein in some vegetables. So so if you're unsure, just Google it, have a look, see, just Google how much protein is in different foods. That would work. That would do the job. Generally, as far as I'm concerned, I eat lots of meat, cheese. They would be the two main protein sources. And by meat, I mean red meat, white meat, and fish, of course. Fish is a good protein source. The second macronutrient is carbohydrates, and they're, of course, what we, based on my previous two podcasts, they're what we want to reduce. So in a ketogenic diet, we are minimizing how many carbohydrates we eat. And the carbohydrates, as I have mentioned, but reiterating, the carbohydrates are an energy source. That's all they do. They create energy for your body. They don't help build stuff. They just create energy. And that energy, if you're a carbohydrate, is in a fairly quickly acting form. It goes through your stomach into your intestine, gets released into your bloodstream, and then goes and gives every cell in your body energy. Now, in a ketogenic diet, we want to minimize how many carbohydrates we eat, because we don't want our energy coming from carbs. We want our energy to be coming from fats. And that's the dynamic difference between a ketogenic diet and a standard diet. So therefore, as far as the carbs are concerned, these are all of your root vegetables like potatoes and carrots and onions and parsnips and all of those. Then you've got all of your spaghettis and pastas and all of those things, rice, all of your bread, anything with gluten in it. So all of your breads, buns, cakes, biscuits, all of those sorts of things are carbohydrates. You have slow-release carbohydrates, and then you have fast-release carbohydrates, like people have been told to eat brown rice because it's a slower release than white rice. all this sort of thing. But as far as we're concerned, a carbohydrate is a carbohydrate. We don't want any of them to be our primary source of energy. So as far as the carbs are concerned, I normally suggest, a lot of people will suggest in the ketogenic world, will suggest that you should have 5% of your calories coming from carbs. I suggest you sort of can take those up to 10% after the first couple of weeks that you've been doing it. Now, in that instance, 10% of your calories isn't very much. So if you're on, say, 2,000 calories a day as a bloke, then that's only 200 calories, and that's 50 grams worth of carbohydrates. So it's not very much to eat. So therefore, you've got to be kind of fairly particular about what you want to eat. For me, it's mainly salady stuff that I have at tea time with my main meal. So I chuck in some leafy salad veg. You get them out of a plastic bag these days. There's sort of all these baby leaf vegetables. And then tomatoes are a form of carbohydrate. So I use cherry tomatoes and I chop those up. Then we've got gherkins. I like a little gherkin, chop that up and throw it in there. That's another carbohydrate. Most vegetables and all fruit are carbohydrate. So a banana is a very fast-acting carbohydrate. It's got a lot of sugar in it. Leafy salad, greens and stuff, lettuce and cabbage and all of those things, kale and broccoli, they don't have a huge amount of carbohydrate in them, and your stomach has to take a while to break them down. You can imagine how long it takes your stomach to break broccoli down, so as opposed to a banana that hits the stomach and just becomes a mushy mess really quickly. So that's my main source of carbohydrates. The important thing here is to keep them way down. Don't have a couple of pieces of bread. Don't think you're going to get away with a donut. God, I wish you could, but there you go. Even with, for example, people go, oh, I'm really missing an orange. I want to have an orange. Well, instead of having an orange, have half an orange. And in a perfect world, to be honest, you'd give it a bit of a squeeze first and squeeze a lot of the juice out, because that orange juice is full of fructose, and fructose causes all sorts of grief inside your body. And then just eat the pulp. Same with an apple. If you really have to have an apple, then just have half of an apple or even a quarter of an apple and just chew it. You'll learn to respect these things a lot more. Bear in mind, as I said last time, all of these fruit like oranges and apples and bananas, most humans didn't have access to bananas or oranges for a lot of the time. And even if you're in a part of the world that did have, say, apples and all these sorts of things, they were only on the tree for a month or so at a certain time of the year. They weren't, we didn't grow up for the last 60 million years. Sorry, that'd be wrong. 60,000 years with supermarkets on the corner that were selling all of these fruit and vegetables all year round. Or another good vegetable to eat that's a carbohydrate is asparagus. And mushrooms have a bit of carb in them as well, but all of that sort of thing is good because they have lots of other nutrients and vitamins in them. So if we move along to the third and final main macronutrient, we're not going to talk about alcohol today, which you could say is a macro without being a nutrient, is fat. So fat, if you've been able to switch over to a ketogenic diet, and you'll know from listening to the second podcast, I discussed how this would happen. So it would take you about a week to switch over to being able to burn fats as opposed to burning carbohydrates. And once you've done that, you want to make sure you stay that way, stay burning fats for a good few weeks before you let your hair down, because you want to teach your body that burning fats is the way you want to be going. And so fats, well, most of us know all of the fats. The main thing is that if you're going to have fats, make sure you don't have low-fat yogurt, because they've taken the fat out to put sugar in. You can go for all of your fatty cheese, all of your cheeses, anything that doesn't have low fat written on it, which means that it's got all the natural fats in it. So you've got your cheeses and you've got the fats on your meats. You've got olive oil is great because that's an unsaturated fat. Avocado oil, avocados, olives themselves are great, and these are the other things I chuck into my salad, so that I can make a salad, a green leaf salad, and I can make it quite fatty by throwing in different cheeses and throwing in olive oil and olives themselves. I prefer pitted olives, so you don't have to spit the seed out across the room halfway through eating. There's nothing worse than forgetting that the olives you're about to eat have still got the seed in, and you chomp down and bust your tooth on one. Incidentally, I've got a jar of chopped up jalapenos, and I poured the water out that they came in, and I filled it up with olive oil, and I have a few jalapenos in my salad every night, and the oil that's in those jalapenos becomes really, really hot. And that's great because you just drizzle that. You get a fork, or you could use a spoon, but I use my fork and I dip it in to get the jalapenos, and then I'll use the fork to just drizzle the olive oil across the salad, and it's bloody nice because it makes the salad nice and hot. It gives it a bit of an extra boost. So you want to be eating lots of fat. Now, here come the macros. So with your diet, you want to be eating, this is calorie-wise, you want to be eating about 70% of your calories need to come from fat. Then 20% of those calories, of your calories, need to come from protein, and that leaves you with 10% to come from carbohydrates. So 70% of fat, that sounds like a hell of a lot of fat. The thing about fat is that it has, per gram, it has 9 calories, whereas protein and carbs both have, per gram, have 4 calories. So working out the mathematics then, effectively, you can think about it that if you had a daily calorie count of 2,000 calories, then 1,400 calories would be coming from your fat, 400 calories would be coming from your protein, and 200 calories would be coming from carbs. And working that out based on 9 calories per gram of fat, the moral of the story is you'd be eating 155 grams of fat, 100 grams of protein, and 50 grams of carbs. So that means that the fat amount in grams should be roughly half of your overall weight of food. And then your protein should be roughly a third, really. So we've got, roughly a third. So if you think when you're weighing it all up, if you're weighing it all up, you probably won't, but just even if it's weighing it up in your head, you look at it by weight, half of the weight on your plate should be made up of fat, and that includes, of course, olive oil and all that sort of stuff, and the fat in the cheeses and the fat in the meat. And then a third of the plate by weight should be protein, and that leaves the remainder to be of your leafy green carbs and that sort of thing. So on that basis, then, if you think of a meal, like, for example, my breakfast, which is scrambled eggs and smoked salmon, well, the eggs are about 50-50 fat to protein anyway, so that works out quite well. And then your smoked salmon, again, is quite high in protein and quite high in fat. So it works out really nicely. With the salads and so on, and for tea time, then if you've got a fatty meat and then you've got your salad, which is giving you your carbs for the day, and then you've got plenty of little bits of cheese in there, which is really high in fat and moderate in protein, and you've got your olive oil drizzled all over it, you've got your olives, it becomes quite a fatty meal without it being really heavy and cluggy. So that's a great way to increase your fat content. And it's important because our generation has been told all of our lives that fat is bad and that you shouldn't eat it. And this is the problem. And so then I'm saying, hey, I want you to switch over and I want you to be eating fats as your main energy source. Well, what happens, of course, is it doesn't take long to think, I don't want to eat all these fats. They can't be good for me, because that's what you've been indoctrinated to think all of your lives. But there's a lot more proof these days that fats are actually really good for you. The unsaturated fats, people will say, are much better for you than the saturated fats, and that's the olive oils and the avocado oils and that sort of thing. Unsaturated basically means that it's liquid at room temperature, whereas the fat on the side of a lamb chop, of course, is solid at room temperature, and so that's a saturated fat. I still eat plenty of saturated fats, but I guess try to minimize it, in as much as I don't eat as much meat as I used to these days, but I do try to get those fats from the likes of olive oil, which is brilliant. Olive oil is kind of your new best friend, and olives and so on like that. So where is it that most people go wrong? Say you've been doing this for 3 or 4 weeks, you're starting to feel pretty bloody good, you're noticing that you're losing a pound a week, you're feeling pretty darn smug with yourself, to be perfectly frank. You're getting the hang of eating these foods. You would have found for the first few weeks you had a real sugar craving, and sugar is addictive, and it's a bit like weaning yourself off cigarettes or anything. You'll find that there's lots of times that you'll be sitting there, especially watching TV or something, and you'll be thinking, God, I just wish I had something sweet to eat. God, I could really hoover into a Mars bar right now. That sort of scenario. And you've got to work your way through that. There are lots of recipe books on Tinternet that will teach you how to make all sorts of sweet things that you can eat using erythritol and all sorts of other pretend sugars. But if you can, and that's fine. I think we all go through that phase at the start because we feel ripped off that we can't eat all those sweet things. So we race out, we buy a few recipe books, we start making all of these other foods that are sweet to make ourselves feel better. But after a while, you get a bit sick of that, and you realize, well, I don't really need these in my diet anyway. So you move away from that. But as you work through, sort of, you've been going for a month or so, it will be natural for you to think, okay, so I'm losing half a pound a week, but I'm eating all of this fat. It can't be great. How can I lose fat if I'm eating fat? And so many people do this. They think, right, and I've done it before. I've been ketogenic for off and on for 12 years, and there's a lot of things I've tried, and I know the number of times I've thought, I want to lose more weight than I'm losing, especially if you plateau. You've been doing it for a year or two and you've plateaued and you think, I need to kickstart this again. And so you'll cut down on your dietary fat, how much fat you're eating. If I do that and I up my protein, I'm still going to keep my carbs down. I'll up my protein. I'll reduce my fat. And so therefore I'm reducing my overall calories, and I'm going to lose more weight. And what happens is you don't lose more weight. Your body actually starts sort of stagnating, and then you'll start feeling tired all the time and lackluster. And eventually you'll think, oh shit, this diet just isn't working for me anymore, and you'll quit. So what have you done to yourself by reducing the fat intake? Effectively, if you think that while you are on carbs, like your standard diet, while you're on carbs, then the carbs were your energy source. And when you got hungry, your body said to you, I want to eat some carbs. I need some toast. I need some bread. I need that bun. I need some pasta. I need some potatoes. And your body is telling you these things. It's saying, I need this. I need that. When you've switched over to fat burning and fat eating, then your body doesn't tell you those things quite so much, because the carbs are making you, the sugar in the carbs is helping restrict the hormone that tells you you're full. So when you're eating just fats, your hormones to tell you you're full are working properly, and so you don't eat as much anyway. So then you start cutting down on your fats. And what's happening then is, if you're not eating carbs for energy and you're not eating fats for energy, you're literally not eating anything for energy. Your body can break down some of the proteins you're eating to give you energy, but that's I believe that's quite a lengthy process, and it uses up quite a lot of energy while it's creating the energy. So you end up with your body being at a deficit for how much energy you're eating, and so therefore your body will react to that by slowing you down, and then you'll just feel lackluster all the time, and eventually you'll think, this isn't working, I feel crap. So the moral of the story is, It doesn't matter how much you think, oh, I'll be able to lose more weight if I eat less fat. Don't. Keep eating your fat. And I know every time I went through that process and then thought, crap, Pete, what are you doing? And I went back to eating plenty of fat and, in fact, reducing how much protein I ate to sort of make sure that it was within the 20% zone. It's easy when you're doing this, and if you're not hungry, to eat lots of protein, because you can hoover down a steak and a little bit of fat to the side and a few salads, and you're full. And so your steak may have been largely protein and a little bit of fat, and so you've sort of switched over the ratios. And so it's sometimes difficult to cut down on how much protein you eat and say, okay, I'm going to have half a steak, and I'm going to make sure I eat the fats and so on. So it can be tricky, but anytime you're thinking cutting down the fat, don't. Cut down on the protein, just in as much as make sure you're only eating half of the steak, or a chicken wing and a chicken leg, not half of the chicken carcass. If you pull into the KFC, which is a little bit high on carbs, but it's about as close to a ketogenic meal as you're going to get from a fast food outlet, and you eat a bucket for one, then there's a huge amount of protein in that, and that will spiral you out of control. So really, you're only looking at 1 or 2 pieces of chicken at best is enough for your protein source, and then you have to go and look for, well, where's my fat going to come from? Is it going to come from olive oil and olives and cheese and everything else like that? And that's the other thing. If you're eating, say, a couple of bits of chicken, this is proper chicken now, I've moved on from KFC, but you've got your salad, which includes bits of cheese chopped up, then bear in mind that those chopped up cheeses, have got lots of fat in them, but they've also got lots of protein in them as well. So you could be easily overdoing it on the protein. So just bear that in mind. Less is more, but make sure you're eating enough fat. Now, so that's that big one. If you can get away with not doing that, then you're more likely to succeed. There's nothing hard about this. It's just, the thing about it is just people will always think, I know better. I can make this work better for myself, and it always ends in tears, and that's speaking from experience. So eating enough protein is one thing, but when you're on the ketogenic diet, eating too much protein can be just about as difficult to avoid. I've spoken about I'm just going through my notes. I've spoken about what carbs to eat, how many calories, and and what size for each meal. So this is the thing. If you're on any other diet in the world, they'll tell you all about calories. You have to count calories. You better get your calorie app, and you better start measuring every food you're eating and make sure you keep down below 2,000 calories and all that sort of crap. Well, you don't have to worry about any of that anymore. Quite simply, because you're only eating the fats, you're not eating the carbs, your body will tell you when it's full, and that's the time you stop eating. If you're feeling full and you've still got that bit of chicken to the side, then don't eat it. Put it in the fridge and eat it tomorrow. It's as simple as that. Your body will tell you when it's had enough, and that's the time to stop. If you don't feel like breakfast, don't eat breakfast. And if you don't feel like lunch, don't eat lunch. I will normally eat tea even if I'm not hungry at, say, when I get home from the gym at about 7 or 7:30 by the time I've fannied around. I'll eat tea, because if you leave it for too late, you don't want to be eating tea at 9 o'clock and then going to bed at 10 o'clock. You'll be going to bed with a full stomach. So if you're going to eat one meal a day, I know the experts say that the biggest meal of the day should be breakfast, and then lunch second biggest, and tea should be your smallest meal. But in reality, most of us don't have time in the morning to have a big meal. We have to grab something and go. My scrambled eggs with salmon takes me, 5 minutes to make. Scrambled eggs, literally you chuck them in a pan, swish them around a bit. Within 30 seconds, they're cooked, and you're sliding them out onto the plate. And you don't need toast or anything with a scrambled egg. That's why it's so good. And lunch, well, let's face it, half the time you're going to be at work or on the run. So I'll quite often have my breakfast and then I'll forget about lunch. I just won't have it. I've got other things I need to be doing at lunchtime. For me, it's mainly walking the dog. But even if you're going shopping and doing other things, or wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stopping for lunch isn't always something you can do. And you don't have to, because it's like, I don't really feel hungry yet. Normally at about 4 o'clock I'll feel hungry, but then I'm going to the gym at 5 when I finish work. So I'm not going to eat at 4 and go and do a workout with a full stomach. That would be disaster. So then I end up not eating lunch at all. And then come tea, well, because by that stage I'm pretty bloody hungry. I've done a workout. I'll chuck some meat in the air fryer and then go upstairs and have a shower, come back down, and my meat's cooked. 10 minutes to make a salad, and I'm right as rain and eating a nice meal. So the moral of the story is, eat when you're hungry. Don't eat once you're full. Don't push it down just because it's there and you've paid for it. And don't worry about 3 meals a day, and don't worry about counting calories. It gets so much simpler than every other way, because, of course, when you're on carbs, you tend to be hungry more often. And that can be the big thing, is like, I need to have lunch because I'm hungry. And then you have lunch and you feel great for an hour or two, and at 2 o'clock you're having the crash and you're wanting to go to sleep at work on your desk. Okay, I've talked. Oh, yeah, that's right. What if I don't like all that saturated fat? Now, this is one that comes from a lot of people, because if you're not used to eating lots of saturated fat and suddenly somebody like me comes along and says you have to increase your fats, you're instantly thinking increasing all of those saturated fats, which are really heavy and difficult. How many people want to sit down and eat half a block of cheese for their lunch? Not many. So that's where unsaturated fats come in, because they're a lot easier to eat. Again, your olive oil, your olives, brie is easier to eat, as brie the cheese is easier to eat than cheddar. I don't eat much cheddar because I find it a little bit difficult, to be honest, and it can be a bit dry. I do like Stilton, but it tends to go off pretty quick in the fridge, of course. But I do knock through quite a bit of brie or camembert just because it's easy to eat. I'm not that keen on feta. In fact, I bought a block of feta cheese a couple of weeks ago and I threw it out last night because I'd only eaten a little bit and decided, nah, don't like that. You got to try these things every now and again. So unsaturated cheese, unsaturated fats, all those fats I was talking about in my salad are quite nice. And then you just have a meat or a fish. Of course, fish is good, especially if you're cooking it and you don't want the saturated fats, then fish is great. And of course, you don't have to, in the olden days, you always had to cook it so that you didn't cook it in fat. You didn't cook it in butter or oil, because that was bad for you. But now it's good for you. So you can cook your fish in butter, throw some salt and pepper and everything else on there. And when you've finished cooking the fish and put it on your plate, then you can pour that buttery mix all over the top of the fish, which is just delicious. So it's just a case of thinking about it, but there are plenty of unsaturated fats for you to choose from, so you don't have to go for the heavy saturated fats if you're struggling with those. And now I'm going to do a quick brush on exercise. So I think I said to you in the previous podcast, with regard to exercise, it's when you're just switching over to burning fats, it's probably good that you don't do much exercise, because your body's got enough problems trying to figure out how to switch to being a fat burner instead of a carb burner without you going and busting your ass exercising. But if you were exercising beforehand, whether that's cardio like running and so on, or at the gym beforehand, then just keep doing it. Just don't have huge expectations for those first 2 weeks while your body switches over, because you will feel a bit knackered. Once you've switched over and your 2 weeks of interim is up, then we need to start introducing you to exercises, and I'll talk a lot more in future podcasts about exercise and all of that sort of stuff. But the important thing is resistance exercise. If you're only doing jogging and running at the moment, then it would be nice for you to get or to think about adding resistance exercises in for a couple of nights of the week, because by resistance it means weights, and by that we are lifting weights that are forcing our muscles into doing some work, And that's good for you for so many reasons, but it's also especially good on a ketogenic diet because it's making sure that all that protein you're eating and the fats that you're eating are helping your muscles work, and you need to keep your muscles working. And that's the other 50% of getting yourself healthy, is getting your muscles working again. Now, if you've been doing weights at the gym and you've been eating carbs and then you switch over, you will find that you may not be able to lift the same level of weights that you could before you did the switch over. And this is after you've recovered from your first 2 weeks. You haven't lost muscle necessarily. In fact, you probably haven't lost any muscle. You may even be gaining muscle because you're eating more protein. But you will have lost all of that water. You'll recall that I said that when you switch when your body finally switches from carb burning to fat burning, you're going to lose about 2 kilograms of weight, and you'll get really excited because woohoo! I've just lost 2 kilos since yesterday, but that's all water, and it's all water that glycogen in your muscles used to hold. So when you've lost all that water did help your muscles with the contraction process to lift heavier weights. So you haven't lost any muscle, but by losing the water out of the muscles, you'll find that there's a possibility that you won't be able to lift the same weights. So don't be burdened by that. Just understand, okay, I can't lift the 30 kilo dumbbells that I did last time. I'm going to go down to 26 kilo dumbbells, and I'll work my way back up. And if you're consistent, you'll find you can lift nice heavy weights again. A lot of people at the gym are like, oh, you're never going to lift heavy weights on keto. Well, that's rubbish. You're never going to be able to grow muscle on keto. You might be able to maintain it, but you won't be able to grow it. That's rubbish as well. You can grow on keto just as much as on carbs. In fact, because your body isn't ever running out of energy like it does with carbs you got to feed yourself 5 times a day. You know, these guys that are trying to put muscle on, they'll be eating 5 or more times a day on carbs. Well, on your fat, on ketogenic, you don't have to do that. Again, you just eat when you're hungry, because if your body gets in need of a bit of extra energy, it can go and find it. It can chew a bit of fat off your ass and you can carry on. So you don't have the problems of having to continually feed yourself. You just don't have to do that. And so you'll find once you've switched over that actually building muscle isn't anywhere near the problems associated with the problems that you used to have, because you don't have to continually feed your body like that. It's just a case of maintaining your protein levels up where you need to maintain them. So if you haven't been working out all the time at the gym, and so therefore you are thinking about getting into it, I have programs and so on I can provide people. Then you're going to need to start off nice and light because it's going to hurt otherwise, but it wouldn't hurt to get into resistance exercising as soon as you can. If you're serious about losing body weight, then we need to keep you ketogenic. That will help you burn fat, and then we need we need to give your body a reason to burn fat, and that will happen the quickest by using resistance training, which also makes sure that your muscles are being used so your body won't want to burn muscle. If you do a standard carb diet where you're restricting calories, a lot of the time, and this has been proven over and over and over again, a lot of the time when people lose weight, they're actually losing muscle because your body says, I'm not so sure about giving away my fat quite easily. You know, your body holds on to fat for a good reason. It needs it for a rainy day. It needs it for when you're really struggling and you're starving. That's when it needs to start burning fat. So if you're not using your muscles, your body will quite often say, okay, I'm going to have a look around and see any muscles I'm not using properly. That's all a source of energy. It's a source of protein. It's a source of everything else. I'm going to actually cannibalize those muscles and use those all the building blocks for those muscles for other stuff. And so that's what it does. So you'll be going on one of these diets where you're counting calories. Yes, you'll lose weight, but you'll find at the end of it you will be a lot weaker than you were at the start. So it's important with a ketogenic diet, we're not in that position so much, but if we do weight training, if we lift weights, then we are promoting our muscles to not only stay alive and grow and stay with us, but we're promoting them to grow. And so therefore your body will switch to burning fats, body fat, and growing muscle. And that's the perfect storm when you can be losing fat and growing muscle at the same time. Once you're down to sort of like 10% body weight, body fat, you'll find that's pretty bloody difficult, but it'll either be one or the other. But if you've got 25, 30% body fat at the moment, then there's no reason why you can't be growing muscle while losing fat. And that's good, because then when you start to lose enough fat, of course, you start to see your muscles through your fat and start seeing a bit of definition going on, and that's great. That's what you really want. Incidentally, if you're a woman doing that, you're not going to end up looking like Arnie Schwarzenegger after 6 months for a number of reasons, but you don't have to worry about getting all muscular, but you have a potential to get reasonably toned, and let's face it, that's what we would all like. Another issue that people have when they switch over to ketogenic is that you can think about lunchtime. It's hard to race down to the supermarket or race to the corner store and grab something to eat, because you'll find at any of these shops it's bloody near impossible to find anything that's actually healthy to eat. When you were eating all of your carbs, it didn't matter, because you could, you'd be able to grab a bread roll or a pie or something and hoover it down. You might even grab a little cake to eat on the way, and a can of Coke, and you're sweet. You can think about how much sugar you were eating back in those days. So when you're ketogenic, you can't do that. You can't race into the shop and buy anything. You can't buy a burger. You can, but you can't eat the buns, really, to be frank. I can eat a Burger King, but I'll generally try to not eat the top bun. And even then, though, a lot of the sauces and things that are thrown in those things have got lots and lots of carbs and sugars in them as well, unfortunately. So the moral of the story is you need to be planning ahead. And to do that, of course, that's tricky in its own. If you're anything like me, planning ahead doesn't come naturally. So the best way is when you cook up a feed at tea time, right down to when you're at the supermarket buying your food. Don't think, I'll buy this container of chicken thighs that's big enough for me tonight. Think, I'll buy that bigger container of chicken thighs so that it'll do me for tonight, and then that'll give me some lunch tomorrow as well. And that's the easiest way. Cook up too much for tonight so that you've got some left for tomorrow. And that way you don't fall into that trap. That's if you decide you want to have lunch. And let's face it, if you are hungry at lunchtime, you want to be able to grab something and eat it. It's a whole lot easier to have it in the fridge and not eat it, but it's there, than it is to suddenly get hungry and think, there's nothing in this bloody house to eat. And then if you can get through to tea time, then all the better. But if you've only been doing it for a few weeks, then of course you may still want to be eating those 3 meals a day. You may not be ready to, your body might not be ready to take the plunge of missing out on a meal. So that's something to bear in mind. Just think ahead, and thinking ahead normally means the night before when you're cooking up. Just cook up enough for tomorrow's lunch as well. Now, if you are doing all of this, you've made the switch over and you're still having problems, or you have doubts, or you have anything else, then you're more than welcome to chat to me directly about that. You can flick me an email. You can find my email address on my website, which is seeyourtoesagain.com. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube as See Your Toes Again. And all of those you can direct message me and just say hello and tell me your problems, because if you've got a problem with any of this, there's chances are lots of other people will have too. So I'd be interested in hearing from them, hearing your issues, and then of course I can always make a podcast and chat about them all in due course. So please feel free to do that. In the meantime, I would hope I'm going to be back in a few days with another podcast. And thank you very much for listening, guys. Have a good day. Bye-bye.